Namaskar, everybody, and a hearty welcome. And thanks to Mataji's for the beautiful prayer. Today's topic is life is a journey, not a destination. All of us here have heard and read much about Vedanta. And I assume most of us are quite familiar with its concept of Samsara, or transmigration of the soul. According to the Vedantic view, as long as the soul remains under the spell of ignorance or spiritual forgetfulness, it will go from birth to death and from death to birth in various planes of existence indefinitely. This circular, transmigratory movement of the soul is what we call samsara. During our life here on earth, we can only experience things according to our capacity and understanding. Yatha karma, yatha shrutam, as the great Shankaracharya says again and again in his commentaries. Some experiences are good, some others bad. Some things produce pleasure, some others give pain. We are compelled by our own karma to go through all these experiences. And none of these experiences is complete. That is to say, none of them is free from limitation. That is why they all leave us dissatisfied. And even after a fairly long life, we still feel a certain incompleteness. Even if we lived a full span of life, 100 years, the period when we can learn from experience is short. First of all, it takes some years before our body and mind become ready to learn. And when we reach that stage, we don't know how to make proper use of our energies. We wear ourselves out, exhaust ourselves in useless things, and then we pass into the monotony of middle age. New kinds of experience become difficult because our nature has become set, and it can only function within its own established, rigid framework. Then comes old age, when energy declines, and then death. By the time we die, we don't feel we have achieved the completeness we sought throughout our life. So we die with a sense of unfulfillment. Some of you may wonder about it, but even our after-death experiences are not very different. It is like an ignorant man traveling all over the world. Because of his lack of knowledge, he won't be able to understand anything worthwhile, because the capacity to learn remains the same. The worlds to which we go after death, they are called bhoga bhumis, the worlds of enjoyment and suffering. Only the experience of pleasure or pain is possible there. There is no learning, no growth, no attainment. So after some time, the soul wants to come back to this karma bhumi, this world of action, because it is only here that further achievement is possible. And this process of coming back is called reincarnation. This is a sort of circular motion going up and coming down, but we go up to a more or less similar state and come back to a similar state. And so it goes on and on. Mercifully, however, this wheel of samsara is not endless. It is indefinite in the sense that we don't know when it will stop, but it does stop. It stops when the soul has had enough of these experiences. The desire for experience comes because of a sense of lack. But the soul in its true nature is ever perfect. It actually has no lack. Only because of its own self-forgetfulness, it imagines that it lacks. Thinks what it wants is outside and has to be gathered by means of action and experience. Now, the soul can recover from this self-forgetfulness in different ways. When we have had enough sleep, we wake up. Or, for some reason, we may suddenly wake up in the middle of the night. Or, a bad nightmare may shake us out of our slumber. In the same way, the soul wakes up when its karma is exhausted or when the necessity of experience is over, or when an exceedingly nightmarish experience jolts it out of its self-forgetfulness. Then the process of transmigration comes to a stop. Now the question is, what is it that keeps us in samsara, and how do we get out of it? We don't have to wait for a nightmarish experience to visit us. If we are intelligent, there are other ways. Vedanta says this world of illusion is something we have built up ourselves. If we want to get out of it, we should first find out what is holding it together. It depends upon certain conditions, and if a change can be brought about in those conditions, this existence will itself become dissolved, it will become dissipated. As you know, according to Vedanta, every individual soul, wherever it is in samsara, is moving towards self-rediscovery. And this life is only a stage in that long journey back to the source. There's a remarkable lecture on this same subject, the soul's journey to its destiny, by Swami Bhaswatananda. I'm only voicing his ideas in this talk. In that lecture, Bhaswatananda says, this long journey back to the source can be divided into 3 stages: instinctive, thinking, and intuitive. I repeat, instinctive, thinking, and intuitive. We could say, in other words, subconscious, conscious, and superconscious. These are the 3 stages that he mentions. Animals are in the instinctive stage. They don't have the power of thought. They don't have much control over their own lives. And they are subject to all kinds of external forces. If these forces are favorable, they thrive. If not, they suffer and die. So, animals can't deal with their circumstances with intelligence, as we humans can do. They just have to yield to them. So, they are almost fully governed by instinct. We humans are in the thinking stage. We have the power of adaptation, which means external circumstances don't govern how we behave. On the contrary, they bring out a force from within us. We face our conditions and try to conquer them for our own advantage. That means we have a purpose of our own. This is what makes us humans special. Nature can't dictate things to us. Swami Vivekananda says, in every phase of our development, we have said no to nature. We have had our own way. So, what is it that makes us assert ourselves against nature? It is for a purpose hidden within, not what nature says. More internal nature. Not what nature says, but what we say. That is the important thing. Vedanta says this purposiveness, this is the first indication of our true self. According to Vedanta, volition or the power of will, it is a quality of the Atman, not of the mind. It is the light of the Atman trying to manifest itself through the mind. We are primarily conscious beings. Our motives are conscious motives, and our purposiveness is a conscious attitude. So we humans are in the stage of conscious life. But this doesn't mean that our conscious existence is satisfactory. It is too limited, without much meaning and significance, and futile in the end, in a sense. We build up so many things during the course of our life, only to lose them all in old age. And then death comes and snatches everything away. So, as we heard just now, whatever we may accomplish here is not entirely satisfactory. For that matter, thinking itself is not very helpful. Our knowledge is very limited. Even when we have the facts and exercise our reason upon them, it often fails to give us the correct conclusion. That is why time and again we find that what we thought to be true is not true at all. Our thinking has been all wrong. Holy Mother says, people don't know what they want. They want one thing and end up choosing something else. This is what usually happens when we depend too much on our so-called conscious thinking and reasoning. In the end, we are left feeling that our whole life has been meaningless, has been a waste. We may ask, then why is our consciousness so limited? Why is our life so frustrating? That is a different question. Our main point here is, in spite of all those limitations and frustrations, we still have a dream of perfection. For all our failures, we just can't give up that dream. We feel, if not this conscious thinking, there has to be some other way of arriving at perfection through some power other than this conscious thinking mind. We are all reaching towards something which we usually call intuition. This is the truth, though people find it hard to believe it, to believe that there is a stage beyond limitation, that there is such a thing as intuition by which we can know reality immediately and with certitude. Immediately means without the mediation of the body, mind, or senses. Every living being already has this light of intuition within. Only it is covered, distorted. If we have a sense of perception at all, it is because of this inner light. Even to know wrongly, even to make errors, we must have this intuition to begin with. Just as even to see dimly or distortedly, there must be light in the first place. The difference between the three stages, instinctive, thinking, and intuitive, is only a difference in how much of this inner spiritual light is manifested. This much we all know. There are people who have reached this intuitive state, this superconscious state of perfection. But our own lack of perfection prevents us from recognizing them. It is quite possible that there are more intuitive beings in the universe than we think. This little world of ours is only one of many planes of existence in this phenomenal universe. This little world of ours is just one. There are many other planes of existence above ours where beings are far superior, and in those planes of existence they live. I don't mean these fairies and angels and gods, but other spiritual beings living in those still much higher planes who are by nature contemplative and intuitive. Somewhat like the Ishvara Kotis and Nitya Siddhas, or these great Saptarshis maybe. They are said to be absolutely pure, always aware of their spiritual nature. When a person who has attained a very high level of spiritual development here on earth, when such a person dies, they go to one of those regions and lives in the company of similar beings. You know this little story Sri Ramakrishna used to tell about Krishna and Arjuna. Arjuna used to look upon Krishna as an incarnation of God. One day, Krishna takes him to a certain place in the forest and asks him what he saw there. Arjuna sees a huge tree with clusters of berries hanging from it. Then Krishna leads him closer to the tree, and Arjuna sees that they are not clusters of berries, but clusters of countless Krishnas. That is to say, countless incarnations of God hanging from the tree of Brahman. If this is true, then there may very well be other planes of existence far superior to ours. This poor little world of ours can't be the end of God's creative power. Even if it has produced Krishnas or Buddhas or Christs or Ramakrishnas. At the very height of this phenomenal universe, there is a world perfect in every respect, divine, both inside and outside, with God-like beings. That world Vedanta calls Brahmaloka or Satyaloka, the world of divinity, the world of truth. In our world, Krishnas, Buddhas, Christ, and Ramakrishnas are like they're bright spots of consciousness here and there in a sea of dead matter. But in that world, everything is luminous, everything is divine. Form, substance, everything. Anyhow, it takes a long, long time for the soul to reach that plane. Like Sri Ramakrishna's camel, we have fooled ourselves into imagining that pain is pleasure. It takes many bitter experiences before the soul can finally turn away from the so-called joys of this world. That is a lesson we learn after a great deal of experience on this gross plane. But when the soul does turn back, one begins to see extraordinary things of a spiritual nature, and one becomes convinced of the reality of the spiritual world. Every soul is destined to pass through these stages on its way to liberation or moksha. But liberation itself is not a stage. It is absolute. Nothing can be said about it. All that can be said is, it is easy for those who have reached the intuitive state to leap into the absolute, so to say, and become entirely free. However, moksha is not our present concern. Our present concern is the soul's passage from one stage to another. But how do we know that the soul really passes from one stage to another and eventually attains liberation? The answer is this. Each of these stages is limited. The word stage means a period that somebody passes through. So it is only a temporary condition, not permanent. Then we have another significant word, phenomenon. We call this universe a phenomenal universe. It means something that is not eternal, something that is changeful, something that is passing. It is characterized by movement, never at a standstill. Because the power that brings into existence is dynamic, this is also changeful. Dynamism is by nature change, and so it eventually exhausts itself. The very power that produces a finite thing destroys it. This we can observe. We say life contains death, or creation contains destruction. What does it mean? When force is used, it is spent. When power is applied, it is depleted. In the same way, when life is lived, it comes to an end. When karma is experienced, it is exhausted. So, destruction is inherent in everything phenomenal. The power, the cause that has brought about the subhuman or the instinctive existence for the soul will itself destroy that state by its very working. When the soul experiences a certain stage again and again, it exhausts that stage. It can no longer react to the same experiences with the same passion. This is also our experience. And then it moves on. Every soul in the instinctive stage will move out of that condition into the conscious or thinking stage. And because even the thinking stage is limited, the soul will be forced out of it into a still higher intuitive stage. It has to be so. There is no escaping this. This is how we can be sure that every soul will pass through all these stages until it has reached its own highest state of self-realization, self-knowledge. Its self-forgetfulness will be destroyed. It will no longer be tied down to the phenomenal universe of name and form. The force of karma and reincarnation will come to an end, and it will know itself as it truly is. So long as souls are in the instinctive state, how far they will progress depends upon external nature, mostly. But when they reach the thinking stage, it becomes possible for them, that is to say, it becomes possible for us, human beings, to study their own condition. They can think pro and con, they can analyze and speculate. This is when they begin to question, what am I? Why am I here? How did I end up here? Is this the best situation, or is there a state of perfection? If there is, how am I to reach it? In fact, we are all now in that stage. But to return to our original question, what holds us here? We heard in the beginning that we are here for experience. We feel that we must have experience. If we didn't have the senses, if we didn't come in contact with the external world, if we didn't see things, read books, or learn from others, we would be practically idiots. We would have grown-up bodies and undeveloped minds. But the mistake we make is, we think there is no other knowledge than this knowledge of the external world derived through the senses. Or we don't care about any other kind of knowledge. We always want to know things outside of ourselves. So why is this? This is a peculiar situation. According to Vedanta, reality is non-dual. It is infinite and eternal. There is no I and the universe. It is non-dual. It is all one. Just because I think I am this small person, I don't actually become this small person. Nor does the universe move outside me and become external. The non-dual nature of reality doesn't change because of my forgetfulness or stupidity. So the truth is, I'm still this universe and the universe is me. That is the real, deeper reason why I can't give up this universe. This is the peculiar situation. In our present perception, we don't know this truth. If we knew that the universe is me, in fact, and yet in my present perception, it is not me. If we knew this, then we wouldn't think we had to experience the universe through the senses. As long as this condition lasts, we can't give up the outside world. That is why the soul in the thinking state is held down here, in this prison house of the mind and senses. Now we come to another very interesting thing. In Hinduism, there is another extraordinary concept about this state of why we are, what holds us here, and how long we'll have to be here. According to that concept, every human being is born with certain debts. And our whole life is a process of repaying them. The soul will be held here until all debts are paid off. They speak of 5 debts: debt to the sages, debt to the gods, debt to our ancestors, debt to our fellow human beings, and debt to subhuman creatures. I repeat, debt to the sages, that is, the lineage of our spiritual teachers. Debt to the gods, from whom we get so many things through nature. Debt to our ancestors, debt to fellow human beings, and debt to subhuman creatures. If we put them in modern terms, we may say every individual is born with certain responsibilities. Responsibilities to one's family, to one's society, to the gods, to one's culture, and, of course, to nature. There is much to be said about these debts and responsibilities. They're a great deal more than we might think, but that is another subject by itself. But the meaning behind this whole concept is that we have duties to fulfill throughout the journey of life before we can reach our final destination. As long as we feel that the world is outside of us, as long as we feel that it means something to us and that we have to know it, then we must take it seriously. I can't just say, I don't care. I earn my money, I live my life, I have my fun. Why should I bother? That is the surest way to moral and spiritual death. We can't get out of samsara like that. Why? Because we have taken it to be real, but we don't know how to treat it in such a way that we can get out of its hold. Only when we take it seriously, understand its value, and meet its demands with the highest sense of duty, only then will this existence let us go. We just heard that there comes a point when the soul in the instinctive stage loses all interest in the things that nature is bringing to it. Then nature itself pushes that soul up into a higher form. In this thinking stage also, nature will do that. But we speed up the process when we take this stage seriously. Nature is just making some legitimate demands. It never overcharges us. If we respond with sincerity and with the best of motives, nature will only take from us what is due and let us go. In India, when a man becomes a sannyasi, he is allowed to abandon all his responsibilities. Society expects nothing more from him. He is entirely free. But then, a person is not free to renounce and become a sannyasi before he has finished all his duties and wants nothing more from life. So, renouncing is not escaping. One just cannot. I may put on the dress of a monk and beg my food and live under a tree, but that doesn't make me free. If I am attached, if I am bound internally, nature itself, my own nature, will force me to work. This is what Krishna points out to Arjuna right at the beginning of the Gita. Yes, life will make us work if we haven't freed ourselves from this phase of existence. So, how do we become free? When we have treated our present stage of existence at its best, with the best in us, then we become free of it. That is the secret. So in Hinduism, we say everyone is born with rights. We don't say everyone is born with rights, but is born with duties and responsibilities to fulfill. We are all indebted to the larger community of beings, superhuman, human, and subhuman. And it is good that we are born with obligations. It is much better, especially from a spiritual angle, to have the attitude that our life here is not to get something but to give. Then the sense of obligation doesn't become a burden. On the contrary, it becomes a motivation for higher, nobler endeavor. It makes detachment easier and natural, and then the soul grows and expands. So, this is how it all happens. And when a person has fulfilled all obligations, paid off all debts with which he was born, then this thinking or mental stage of nature will no longer have a hold on him. If we study the whole thing psychologically, we will see how true it is. Whenever we enjoy the things of the world, but don't assume the consequences as a noble obligation, then our very enjoyment degrades us. It's like going to a department store and helping ourselves to things without paying for them. We become thieves. The Gita actually says we become thieves if we enjoy the fruits of nature and don't make offerings to the gods who give us those fruits through nature. So enjoyment must always be coupled with this sense of responsibility. Otherwise, we sink lower and lower until we lose our human status. On the other hand, if we repay our debts to this plane of existence, our desire for enjoyment gradually gets converted to an entirely different view of things. We become purified, and we'll be able to see with that purified mind, we'll be able to see more of this phase of existence than before. Suppose, for example, I would like to be rich, and I do become rich. Immediately, I'll have to assume the responsibilities of wealth. I have to support my relatives. I have to give to the poor, make donations to schools, hospitals, charities, temples. If I do all that in a noble spirit, Vedanta says, very soon I'll find that possession is not the important thing. Giving is the important thing. We have received so much. So my sense of ownership and possessiveness is replaced by the sense of sacrifice and renunciation. So, to treat this phase of existence with the highest reverence, that is the means of our liberation from here. If we are caught here, if we have been forced to come to this world, then we must find out what compels us. And then we must face this world. When we do our best with the right attitude, then we feel a kind of release, a sense of detachment and freedom. And simultaneously with this, we also become aware of a higher dimension of life. When we have discharged all our obligations consciously, thoughtfully, wholeheartedly, our mind, our power of perception undergoes a change, and then we become intuitive. So, in this lower phase of life, knowledge depends on the body and the senses. The mind can only deal with what the senses bring it. It can't produce anything of its own. That is why truth remains elusive, and as we heard in the beginning, even our best judgments often end in error. But when we are no longer dependent on the senses, our perception becomes more internal. The mind is free from its bondage to the body. It is here that spiritual practice comes in. Real, serious spirituality is only for those who have become aware, those who are convinced that what they are seeking is not in the sense world. Reality lies beneath what the senses reveal. Ashokanandaji says, if the eyes reveal a man to me, I see his face. But the greater truth, the reality of the man, lies behind his face. And this reality is already within me. The universe and I are not two. We are one. And because this reality is already within me, I don't have to look outside. But to be able to perceive this greater reality, the mind must be completely free, free from the slightest bondage. And that freedom comes only through spiritual practice. So hard spiritual practice is like clearing a forest for farming. You first cut down the big trees, then after they have dried a little, you burn them. Then you see burnt, ugly looking stumps standing here and there, and you have to remove them. When you have removed those stumps, roots, and everything, the ground is clear. And then a beautiful harvest can be grown. In the same way, the mind must be freed from all the remnants of sense desires for outer things. Then gradually the mind becomes calm, quiet, and that is the mind that becomes intuitive. A scattered, objectified, or thinking mind can't show us the truth. It is wrong perception, it is desire that force the mind to become scattered. When that same mind is gathered in and focused on the Atman within, it at once becomes intuitive and knowledge flashes. It is compared to a lightning flash. Even in pitch darkness, a flash of lightning illumines everything without a shadow, making things as clear as in daylight. In the same way, the flash of lightning is said to bring everything to us with the utmost clarity, without a shadow of doubt. That is real intuition. Now, not the mad intuition that is said to give us the power of reading other people's futures. That is no intuition. Real intuition is what brings us the knowledge, is that which brings us the knowledge that we are not this body and mind. And when this knowledge comes, it won't be just mental knowledge, it will be actual perception. We feel separate from the body. When this intuition comes, we will already have reached a point where we are no longer tied up with the plane of existence called Samsara, in which we are made to go from life to death and death to life. We have already gone out of it into the heart of reality. So that is our destination, and this life is only a stage on our journey towards it. Thank you. Now we'll have a closing song, which is the theme of which is very close to the subject of this thought. But before that, for next Sunday, that is the 2nd July, the program is still undecided. So I talked to Maharaj on the phone, and he said, please keep checking our website. Maybe in 2 or 3 days, something will turn up. The program for the next Sunday. So thank you all. And after the song, we can go downstairs to the basement and have some refreshments.